Hello, and welcome to the Surviving the Holidays program, a program designed specifically for mourners, for those who have suffered the recent loss of a loved one to death and are dealing with the holidays coming up ahead, which can be a difficult time. First of all, let me thank you for joining us, taking the time to do this, and let me congratulate you too on being brave and taking a step of courage into working through your grief. We know that grief is difficult. We know that your loss specifically is a struggle for you. Otherwise, you would not be reaching out for help right now. And we just think you are very brave in doing so, because there are a lot of other folks who are just like you coming up on the holidays, who are dreading the holidays and how it will be without their loved one for the first, second, or third time in a row. It's always difficult when the holidays come up. It's a time when we think about family getting together. And when our loved one is not there, well, it just leaves the pain and pushes on the pain a little harder and makes it difficult for us to get through those holidays. So hopefully we'll share some ideas, some practical advice, some practical things that you can put into place for the holidays coming up ahead, so that this holiday season will not be as difficult as it would be without these skills. Let's take a look first at what can be expected during the holidays. Well, the holiday season is normally a stressful time for many people because there's lots of high expectations. In fact, in the United States, we kind of go crazy about the holidays, and it's because there are lots of people out there, and maybe you're among them, who feel like the holidays have to be perfect in order to be enjoyable holidays. Well, that puts a lot of stress on people. Well, let me take some of the stress off of you right now. The holidays will never be perfect, especially with the death of a loved one and you're still suffering in grief with that. It will not be perfect. And it will not be perfect for one main reason. The holiday season will never be perfect because people are involved, and people are not perfect. So first of all, this sounds like a strange thing for a counselor and someone who's trained in the ministry to tell you to do, but I want you to lower your expectations of the holidays. Therefore, you will not be disappointed or as disappointed when you go through that difficult time during the holiday. It doesn't have to be perfect. And most of all, it doesn't have to be perfect for you, but you don't have to make it perfect for everybody else. Your grief is not going to ruin anybody else's holiday. So don't hold back and try to hide what your needs are during the holidays. It's very important for you to share with others what you need, and most of all, what you need is people, support, and you need people to be able to listen to you when you need to talk about your grief and process what you're going through. And you just need to know that other people hear you and understand what you're going through. After the death of a loved one, many mourners approach the holidays with dread and anxiety, as I've said. And for many people, the holidays represent family, treasured relations, and memories. There are many difficult days during the first year after the death. Many different activities that are normally family activities that you're going to be going through this first year, if this is your first year, without that loved one available. And so that's going to make things a little harder on you emotionally and spiritually too. It can affect your spiritual life. You feel a lot of pressure from others during this time of the year, and maybe from yourself too, to put grief on hold during the holidays in order not to ruin the perfect special days for everyone else. Well, don't give in to that pressure. You're only going to make the time more stressful for yourself if you feel like you have to hold back and not express your grief. Grief does not take a holiday. Grief does not take a vacation. And especially during the holidays, you're going to feel that pain and the stress of grief a little harder, because it's a reminder, everything is a reminder, that your loved one is not there to share the holidays with you. Remember to not put your grief on hold. Let's look at some definitions real quickly of the different aspects of grief so that we can all be on the same page. The first term is bereavement. That's the objective event of loss caused by the death of someone significant. And the word bereave or bereft really fits what's going through with us emotionally. What's taking place is that we feel like something valuable has been stolen from us, or we feel in many ways broken. And that describes bereavement, that describes grief, that describes loss a whole lot better than the next term, which is grief, which is the person's total response, emotional, spiritual, physical, and social response to the event of the loss. Mourning is the outward acknowledgement of the loss, usually reflecting the practices of one's culture. It's what I call grief gone public. And in our culture, we're not allowed a lot of different ways to express grief. In fact, sometimes we're told that we need to hurry up and get over it and quit being public with it. Well, that's far from the truth. You still need to express your grief. You still need to mourn. And what's really important, you need to mourn with people and in places where you feel safe, comfortable, and cared for. Grief work is the cognitive process of confronting the reality of the death of someone who is significant and dealing with the impact of the loss. It's the hard work of grief. It's why you're tired all the time when you're in grief. The goal of grief is reconciliation. We want to have a renewed sense of energy and confidence felt by the grieving person, together with the understanding of how that grieving person can have their lives changed forever by the loss, to accept and adapt to the loss of the person, to accept the new reality that is hard for us to accept, the reality that we don't want to accept. Well, grief is the natural response to loss. It results from the love or emotional investment that we have in the person. Grief is just another expression of love. A lot of times I hear people say that grief is the price we pay for loving people. Well, that's not very encouraging. That's not very uplifting. I don't think that's true. I think grief is another expression of love. Let me explain it real quickly. Grief is the love that you still have in your heart for that person who is not physically present anymore. And because they're not physically present anymore, you can't express it in the ways that you used to when they were here. And so you find new ways, and those new ways are in grief. Emotions experienced during grief are neither good nor bad, they just are. The emotions that you feel are often painful and uncomfortable, and what you have to understand is they feel bad, but they are not bad in and of themselves. It's what we do with the grief emotions that can make them either good or bad. And grief emotions will be dealt with now or later, whether we want to or not. It's kind of like the kid who's trying to get your attention while you're on the phone. You try to shush them and tell them that you're talking and you need to be listening to that person on the phone, but they don't give up. Grief emotions don't give up. As long as you are feeling the loss of that person in your life, you are going to feel grief emotions. And you will have them come in waves sometimes. Sometimes you'll be doing very well, and then the next moment a memory will come and grief will hit you again. Grief is a highly individualized experience. Everyone does not grieve in the same predictable way. It's not always denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance in that order. And a lot of times those stages of grief are quoted to people and it makes them think that grief is predictable. Those things are involved in grief, but they don't always happen in that order. And everybody's grief is going to be totally unique to them because the relationship that the grief is based on is totally unique to that person and their loved one. Grief will not always be like it is in the beginning. That's the hopeful thing. That grief is crushing now, it's overwhelming, it's all-consuming, but as time passes, the grief experience changes. And those grief pangs that happen in the very beginning begin to happen farther and farther apart, and there are fewer of them as you progress in your grief. What should you remember during the holidays? Well, first of all, you should not be alone during the holidays. You were never meant to go through grief by yourself. You need others listening ears, and you need their supporting and encouraging words. And you need to let them know what your needs are. Don't be silent about it. If you're not getting what you want during the holidays, it's probably because you're not asking for it. Love does not end with the death. Remember that. Your love for the person and the relationship that you have with that loved one continues even after the death. You may not be connected to them physically anymore, but you are still connected to them emotionally and spiritually. You should not be alone during the holidays. You need to talk about your grief. Don't be afraid to share what you think, feel, and need during the holidays. It's very important that you share with others what your needs are, as I said before, or you won't have those needs met. You need to know and honor your limitations during special days coming up, and you need to set your expectations low, as I've mentioned before, not set them too high, not expect yourself to be perfect, not expect the holidays to be perfect and all the people around you to be perfect. You know, sometimes we expect families to get together, and these are families who during the rest of the year can't even get along with each other. Some members with others, have disagreements. And then we expect them all to gather under one roof and for everything to be perfect. Don't expect it to be perfect. Don't set your expectations too high because you'll be disappointed. You should eliminate unnecessary stress, build in time for yourself and your needs during the holidays. You should have time that you by yourself sometimes and to grieve. You should have time when you're with someone who will listen and you feel safe with, who you can share your grief feelings with and process your grief. You need to be with supportive, comforting people. Limit your time with people who are difficult to deal with or who cause you stress. Yes, you should spend some time with those difficult relatives, but at the same time, you don't have to spend your whole day with them. You don't have to spend the whole holiday season with them. Spend as much time as you can tolerate. Now, that doesn't sound very Christian, but it would work out better and you'd be a whole lot closer to what Christians are supposed to be and their thoughts and their feelings towards others if you spend less time with those people who irritate and frustrate you. You have an emotional need to mention the name of the person who has died. You live to hear the person's name and to hear stories about them. It keeps their memory alive. You have an emotional need to mention the name of the person who has died, so don't let others shame you into not talking about that person or about your grief during the holidays. You need to tell others what is right for you during the holidays, what is comforting and what is painful. If you want to limit your time with family, tell them ahead of time that you're going to do that maybe you'll stay through the meal and that you'll stay for the opening of the presents, but then you will leave immediately after. And tell them ahead of time so that they won't be surprised or disappointed. And you should plan ahead for family gatherings. And the way you do that is if you're going to have a family gathering and you're afraid you're going to have a grief outburst during that time, sit down with some family albums, look through the photos, and the grief will naturally take place beforehand. And you're less likely to grieve during those family gatherings if you've done some grief ahead of time. It's not always going to happen that way, but it can. You ought to embrace your treasure of memories during the holidays, and you need to reflect on why you and others celebrate these special days and make them filled with meaning and purpose. There are two reasons why we celebrate holidays. The first is that they reinforce our basic belief systems. At Christmas, we're celebrating the birth of Christ. At Thanksgiving, we're celebrating our thankfulness and thanking God for what we've been given. It also allows us, the second reason that we meet together with family during the holidays and celebrate, is that it gives us time with those people that we care about most, and that we can build memories now for use in the future, maybe when that person is not here. You should depend upon the resources available to you through your faith. Sometimes we forget about using our faith to help us through this time, but for a lot of people, it's their first resort. For some people, it's their last resort. You should always use all the resources that you have available to you spiritually and otherwise during the holidays. Mourning in a healthy way during the holidays will help you heal and is going to move you closer to reconciliation, accepting the new reality and adapting to it. And remember, the dread of the holidays is usually worse than experiencing the actual days themselves. I'm giving you here a 3-point plan for the holidays, and this first remembrance is the first point in it. You know, we dread the holidays coming up and dealing with this loss and dealing with our grief during the holidays. And sometimes in our imagination before those holidays come up, in the dread of the holidays, we can imagine all sorts of horrible things happening. Well, in my experience and in the experience of several other mourners that I've dealt with, when they come to the actual holidays themselves, they're not as bad as they were anticipated to be. And so remember, the dread of the holidays is usually worse than experiencing the actual days themselves. The second point of your plan for the holidays is make a plan for the holidays. Don't just sit back and let the holidays and your grief happen to you. What you will feel if you have a plan is you will feel more in control and you'll know what to expect possibly. Now, sometimes plans don't pan out, and that's why we have Plan B. Don't be afraid in the middle of your plan, if it's not working, to switch to something else that feels more comfortable. And the last point in the 3-point plan for preparing for the holidays is take time to remember your loved one in a special way with an activity or a meaningful ritual. You need to have your grief taking place during the holidays, just like you do during the rest of your time in your life. You need to remember the person and to miss them and to honor them with activities or in ways that are meaningful for you, usually rituals. Why are rituals important? We have an ongoing need to remember our loved one on a regular basis, and we fear that we will forget them. Well, rituals help us to not forget them. When words fail us to help us express our grief feelings and experiences, rituals can help. Some of those rituals are some of the things you see listed here: lighting candles, balloon launches in honor of the loved one, planting a tree or starting a memorial garden, creating a shadow box or memory box, remembering the loved one at meal times or at gatherings with a prayer, keeping a chair open in their honor when they're not there for the first time, wearing a physical remembrance or reminder of the loved one. It's a physical connection to the loved one and can help you to deal with your grief. Writing letters or keeping a journal are a way many people get out their grief emotions, express their grief emotions, and get them outside of their head where they're just going round and round in circles and onto a piece of paper where they can process what they're going through. What are some really helpful hints for the holidays? Well, you need to recognize that the holidays will be different now that your loved one is gone. They can never be the same. So don't expect them to be the same, and don't compare what's happening now to what happened in the past, because sometimes it will only send you into deeper grief. Do only what gives you comfort and is meaningful. Don't get involved in activities that are painful for you. If they're painful, you need to excuse yourself and do something else at that time. Remember that grief never takes time off, and so you cannot push your grief to the back and hope that it will go away. It will not. You will still have those feelings of missing your loved one during the holidays, and you need to express them. Talk with your family and friends about how you will observe the time and let them know what your plans are ahead of time and what your needs are. What you need to do is, if you don't like the old traditions, if they're too painful for you, you can make new, meaningful traditions. And how do you do that? Well, I'll tell you how a tradition starts. One, a person decides that, this might be a really meaningful and significant way to honor some person or our beliefs, and so this is what we're going to do. And you know what happens the second time you do it? It becomes a meaningful tradition. So that's how new traditions are started. Start new traditions during the holiday in memory of your loved one, and also to replace those painful traditions that you no longer can take part in. And be prepared for grief outbursts. They're going to happen. And when they do happen, you don't need to excuse yourself. A lot of times in grief support groups and in grief counseling, mourners will start crying, and then the first thing they do is apologize. You have nothing to apologize for. And people who are upset by your grief outburst, it's really their problem, it's not yours. You didn't cause them to have a bad holiday, and you will not ruin their holiday by having a grief outburst. And you will be healthier, and you will be progressing in your grief faster if you have those grief outbursts during the holidays. Be kind to yourself and accept help from others. Take care of yourself and don't overdo when you become overstretched or you're overactive during the holidays. You're doing more than you can actually take. Then that puts you in an emotional state to where you will be more vulnerable to deep grief. Set realistic goals and plans for yourself during the holidays. If needed, plan time for your grief. And that sounds really strange, but remember what I talked about, sitting down and looking at family albums or going through videos and watching the person. That is a way that you can set time aside to remember your loved one, to honor them, and to remember how much they gave to you. Remember, you can get through these difficult days. You can do it with these skills and with the help of others. Eliminate unnecessary and painful activities. We've talked about that. During the holidays, you need to remember that you do have certain rights as a holiday griever. You have a right to say time out when things are too heavy for you, or too difficult, or too painful. You have a right to be honest and kind with people. Tell them what you're really feeling without being nasty about it. And the reason I throw this one in there is because a lot of times we are irritated in our grief, and we have a tendency to bite at people or be a little snarky with them or sarcastic, and we can say some painful things in our grief. You have a right to express yourself, but you have to be honest and kind with others. You have a right to do things differently. You don't have to do it like it's always been done. You have a right to be where you want to be. If you don't want to be right there at that time, you can go somewhere else. You can excuse yourself and step out of the activity. You have a right to enjoy yourself and have fun. Your loved one wants you to have a good life. Your loved one does not want your life to be ruined by their death. And so you shouldn't be in deep grief all the time. Sometimes you can have fun. You can have distractions from your grief. You can have short vacations from your grief, even if it's just a few minutes or a couple of hours. You have a right to be flexible in your plans. You can always change your plan when you get into it and it's not working. You have a right to do things at different times than you have in the past. Change things up a little bit. You have a right to rest, peace, and solitude. You don't have to be constantly busy or active or with people. You have a right to request others to help or do things for you. You have a right to do it all different again next year if you decide so. In other words, you have a right to change your mind always. And you have a right to have an occasional bad moment or a bad day. Now, some of you may have children who are also dealing with the loss that you're dealing with during the holidays. And here are some some tips for how you can help children get through the holidays with their grief. You want to include children and teens in the holiday planning, especially if it deals with honoring the loved one. Prepare children for any changes in the routine and always talk at their level of understanding. Remember, some are very young and they really don't understand the concept of death and that Nana's not coming home anymore or will not be with us. You need to explain it in terms that they'll understand. Give children added comfort and reassurance to the holidays. They need to feel secure and they need to feel that you are there for them and things will happen in an orderly manner and will be predictable. Give children some slack on their behavior because in grief sometimes they act out, but you need to also enforce important rules or boundaries with them, just like you would at any other time. Let children know that they can talk openly about their feelings and their fears. Friends, relatives, and caregivers sometimes fail to realize how significant their help is for others during the holidays. What you can do to help other mourners in your family who may be dealing with the same loss, or with a family member who is dealing with another loss or a friend, offer to help them with shopping, cooking, decorating, or cleaning, and be a non-judgmental listener. You have 2 ears, so do a lot more listening than you do talking. In fact, grievers need you to listen more than they need you to talk. Give a gift in memory of the one who died and do that with the knowledge of the loved one's family. They will appreciate it. Avoid pressuring the mourner to socialize, but include them in as many activities as they are comfortable with. Don't say that they have to come. Give them the opportunity to participate. Encourage them. Offer to help create a plan or schedule for the holidays for the mourner, but let the mourner make the final decision on that plan. And just remember, if you follow these tips, if you do your best to grieve during the holidays and to take care of yourself, next year may just be easier because of what you do this holiday season. Thank you again for listening. Thank you again for giving us your valuable time. And I hope your holidays are meaningful and significant as you deal with grief during the holidays.